that are currently assigned to the Adjutant General to the Director of the Division. It also provides that the State Guard may be activated during states of emergency or as necessary to protect and defend the people of the state from threats to public safety. It increases the maximum number of members from 400 to 1,500. It also requires the director to organize a specialized unit within the State Guard. And lastly, it updates certain statutes to more clearly reflect the State Guard is a separate entity from the Florida National Guard. That is the bill.
Okay. Any questions on the bill? Yes. Senator Polsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you be any more specific about what a public safety threat might be that this State Guard would be used for?
Senator Avila.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So certainly when we have natural disasters, we certainly see, lights, electricity go down. We certainly see in certain instances, not just in the state of Florida, but certainly in other places where there needs to be a stabilization of the environment and of the situation. So that's where they would come in order to establish that public security, where there is no electricity. There's obviously things are down, so there needs to be sort of that re-establishment of public safety so that there's confidence within the situation.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you. So the current force, I believe, is 400 people. Has that been fully populated yet?
Senator Avila.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for that question. So last year was in the implementing bill. So certainly throughout from that time to present day, I think they've received over 3,000 applications. They're still presently going through that application process. This bill will certainly help clarify a lot of the requirements in order to be in the State Guard. So I think that that guidance and that clarity within this bill, certainly now that you have those applications going through the process, I think you're going to start to see those applications turn into potential hires.
Follow up?
Thank you. So if we haven't fully staffed the 400, why do we think we need 1,500 now?
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for that question. So, Senator, as you know, the Florida National Guard right now ranks 53rd out of 54 states and territories. That includes Guam, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and Washington, D.C. So right now we're presently at somewhere around 12,000 Florida National Guardsmen between the Army and the Air. So you have a force that is 12,000, but you have a population that is, bordering on 23 million. Aside from all of that, we've seen in the past 3 years the level of activity that has occurred in our state, whether it's, Hurricane Ian or Hurricane Nicole or several other hurricanes, whether it is wildfires, particularly in North Florida, whether it is flooding, certainly in our neck of the woods in South Florida, whether it is a pandemic, right? You're seeing all this level of activity, and I haven't even gotten to the mobilizations or to the deployments. So you're seeing a force of 12,000 troops that are being stretched to capacity. This State Guard is really meant to support and augment, those shortages, and that cap is not established by the state of Florida. That cap is established at the federal level. So this State Guard is meant to support the activities, whether we have a hurricane, any other natural disaster, another pandemic, whatever the case may be, they are meant to be a support to the Florida National Guard in those instances.
Follow up?
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about the specialized unit and what the differences are and why that's necessary? Bless you.
Sorry.
Senator?
Thank you. Can you repeat that, Senator? Sorry.
I know that sneeze was so loud. What the difference is between the specialized unit and the regular force and why that's necessary?
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for that question. So the specialized unit within the State Guard will be as a sort of an MP law enforcement type of entity. Again, this is certainly in times of natural disasters where you need to stabilize a situation, you need to have a force to augment, certainly any sort of local capabilities, whether it's a sheriff's office or a police department. They will be there to augment those local agencies to provide that stability in the case of, the need for additional public safety.
Follow up?
Thank you. I don't think you mentioned that they are sworn officers who can carry guns and arrest people. Is that the case? Is that only for the specialized unit?
Senator Avila?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that question. Yes, so for that law enforcement specialized unit, they would essentially have to have the same level of training as an LEO.
Any other questions, Senator?
Yes, please. Could this armed unit be deployed to make arrests in conjunction with investigations from the Office of Election Crimes and Security?
Senator Avila?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that question, Senator. So this unit, this specialized unit, again, would be for the reestablishment of public safety. Again, they are also going to be augmenting local law enforcement agencies or state law enforcement agencies wherever the need may arise. They are there to certainly fill the void in those capacities. Certainly, last session, we saw the approval of National Guardsmen helping out DOC with the staffing of those positions within the Department of Corrections. Certainly, that would probably be maybe one of the roles that this specialized unit can play in terms of augmenting that state agency to fill those needs.
Follow up?
Yeah, last question. It was mentioned that this particular State Guard could be used out of state. Can you explain how that would work?
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that, Senator. So right now, the Florida National Guard, we can assist other states. Certainly, we can provide EMAC personnel, right? In the case of one of our neighboring states gets hit by a natural disaster, whether it's Louisiana, Texas, name the state, we can assist. The State Guard would be able to essentially be in that same role, in that same capacity, where they would be able to essentially function as an EMAC team or an EMAC component to assist those other states that have been devastated by a natural disaster.
Sorry, just brought up something else. Thank you. So is it possible, though, that sort of like what happened with the immigration flights, that we went to another state, could this State Guard go into another state for like some kind of political issue? I mean, is that a possibility?
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that question, Senator. So again, they would be there to fill a void. Again, they would be there to augment whether it's a local or a state agency that certainly has a shortage in terms of levels of personnel to conduct their functions. So they would be as a support, as an augment to those state and local agencies.
Yeah, I believe this is the final.
Follow
I know I sound like Pizzo, but I think this could be the final. Can you tell everyone how much is appropriated for this State Guard?
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator. As of last night, there was an agreement between the House and the Senate, and these are all non-recurring funds, and the total is $107.9 million.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, do we have any public appearance?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Do
Mr.
not.
Chair.
Yes, Mr. Powell.
Sorry, thank you. One of my questions, Senator Avila, in terms of when you talk about the Guard being activated for threats of public safety, I know you indicated some of the things centered on or revolving around natural disasters, but when you say threats of public safety for the Florida State Guard, is there a definition of that?
Senator Avila.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that question, Senator Powell. So, you know, and I don't want to just, there may be other instances, right, aside from a natural disaster, right, where they may need to provide that public safety, right? They may need to augment, you know, those local and state agencies in terms of providing a presence, but not only a presence, but stabilizing a situation. So these state guard personnel, again, would be there to assist. They would be there to support and be there to augment any sort of, you know, whether it's a local sheriff's department, whether it's a local PD, whether it is a FDLE. They are there to augment and to support in that role any sort of stabilization that's needed within an environment.
Thank you. Follow up.
Yes.
How will the Florida State Guard interact with FDLE and the National Guard?
Senator Avila.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Powell, for that. Again, so as I mentioned, they're there to support, right? So if the Florida National Guard is certainly responding to a hurricane, as an example, right, similar to that of Hurricane Ian, right, where you saw over 5,000 guardsmen respond, the State Guard would work with the National Guard to provide extra boots on the ground to certainly assist with anything, whether it's in the EOC, whether it's in the pods, whether it's in the state SLRC. They are there to assist with the mission of obviously taking care of that area that's been affected and those residents that have been impacted.
Senator Powell. Good. Senator Pizzo.
Thank you. I have a sort of a procedural question. Who trumps who, or who has authority over whom between a sheriff's department or local law enforcement and this newly established Florida Guard, should there be a disagreement on an operation, a procedure, or an incident?
Senator Avila.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for that. So the State Guard, let's say in a natural disaster, they would be activated by the governor. And they would work in conjunction, the director of the State Guard would work in conjunction with that sheriff, you know, or with that chief of the police department. They would work in conjunction to see where the State Guard can support the efforts of that local agency that's on the ground.
Follow up?
Yes, follow up.
Working in conjunction is everyone's aspiration, but often it is the case that there are large disagreements, both financially and procedurally, between a sheriff's department and the Florida Guard, whose authority supersedes the other.
Senator Avila.
Like, for instance, there's a homicide, there's a death. Whose authority supersedes the other?
Avila.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that question, Senator Pizzo. So I would say in terms of if it's a local incident, you know, certainly deference would be given to that local agency. Now, I would say that similar to what we saw during Hurricane Ian, where you saw a multitude of different agencies, whether local or state, they all came together, they all collaborated to, one, stabilize the situation, then two, make sure that the resources were brought in, and then three, to execute the distribution of those resources. So there was a lot of coordination that was done on the front end, and each of those agencies, whether local or state, they worked in conjunction with each other. Certainly there were some issues that may have arisen, but you know, those are issues that certainly can get resolved. In your example, or in your case, I would say your question, I would say that if it's a local incident, that would be up to the local agency. The State Guard would be there to, again, support or augment any sort of shortage that's needed by that local agency.
Follow up?
Yes, follow up.
Is there an example of a non-local incident that you can give me where the Florida Guard would have authority over the local law enforcement department?
Senator Avila.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for that. I certainly can't think of one off the top of my head right now. I would say that, you know, it depends on the situation, right? If it is a, you know, a Category 5 and absolute disaster everywhere, obviously none of us would ever want to see that. But in a case like that, you know, certainly I think that, you know, the Florida National Guard, under the leadership of the governor, certainly would be giving direction to stabilize the area and to provide, you know, the assistance, set up the pods, obviously set up the state EOC, get the SLRC up and cranking, and then, you know, everything gets out to the impacted area. So I would say that the Florida National Guard would certainly take the lead, but the State Guard in this case would certainly augment and would support the efforts of the mission and of the National Guard in that case.
Follow up.
Follow up?
Shortly after the building collapsed in Surfside, a number of unnecessary hours and days were spent trying to figure out who's who on the flow chart of hierarchy. And it was like the worst kept secret, Senator Book will recall. It was this weird moving mercurial chart of who was in charge, right? And there was a lot of time wasted in that. I'm just asking you, and I don't know is a very good answer as long as you're willing to give it to me later. Yeah. Everybody shows up to the party. Please tell me who's in charge.
Yeah. Senator Avila.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can tell you based on my experience, once a state of emergency has been issued or published or proclaimed, once that state of emergency has been, particularly for natural disasters, the National Guard is certainly running point on making sure that all those resources that are needed into that area are certainly pushed out. But not only that, they also are, you know, are assisting with the stabilizing of the area. Whether it's roads being blocked, they're assisting with clearing those roads. Whether it's establishing, you know, new sort of lights because the lights are not up. You know, the lights went down. They are the ones that are leading on that effort.
Sorry for follow-up. About 3 o'clock a couple Wednesdays ago, I was set to fly home. Senator Albritton walks in my office to say goodbye. And then we ended up spending 7 hours sitting in the same chairs trying to coordinate a response with Director Guthrie, Fort Lauderdale, Dania, Hollywood on the flooding. Come to find out that the organization, the procedure, the manual wasn't really set up. One thing that Director Guthrie impresses upon me over and over and over again in these situations is the city has to ask for help to the county. The county then puts in WebOC,
Yep.
and then has to ask for help up the chain.
Yep.
I remember in the early hours, Mayor Danielle Levine Cava had to sign a request for emergency in order to initiate the state's ability to respond, and then the governor signed accordingly. And it's a very simple question. Do you envision a situation where the Florida Guard, because of a sense of urgency or because of an emergent need, will have the authority to go ahead and take over a situation or take over an area because there's too much of this going on at any particular time?
Mr. Avila.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator. And I 100% understand where you're coming from. I would say, and this is one of the things that came up during the Committee on Resiliency, where there was clearly a lack of coordination at the local level. So it certainly speaks to your question. I would certainly say once the Florida National Guard is engaged, we certainly do, you know, everything to make sure that we're assisting and we're certainly getting the resources out to that impacted area. I could tell you during Hurricane Ian, just specific, and this is specific to my experience with my unit, we did over 30,000. Well, we did close to 30,000 miles in 3 weeks. We set up a BSA. We set up a FLEE. I mean, we conducted search and rescue missions. We rescued over 58 personnel or individuals, residents. Those are things that the National Guard certainly is trained to do in terms of DISCA training, and does and performs it extremely well. the coordination aspect, there needs to be that coordination at the local level. I can't necessarily speak to that because that's respective of each jurisdiction, and they're the ones that need to coordinate that. But once that local level requests our assistance in a state of emergency, it goes through the channels, through WebEOC, goes to the EOC, and then it goes down to the units, well, down to the brigades, then it flows downward, and then that assistance gets pushed out. There is a process, but at the local level, again, that is something that I can't necessarily speak to because each jurisdiction is responsible for that coordination with their local partners, and then, certainly there can be a smoother execution of the mission that needs to take place.
Okay, yes.
Thank you,
Leader Book.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chair. And this is, a dollars and cents question. If the National Guard is deployed federally, I would assume that's covered. If this guard that's being created is deployed, are we on the hook for it?
Senator Avila.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that, Senator Book. Yes, so with the State Guard, it would be the Commander-in-Chief is the governor, and the resources are coming from the state. So similar to what Senator Polsky's question in terms of the budget for this organization, everything would come from the state of Florida.
Follow-up, Chair.
Yes.
But even more than the setup and the people and the manpower and the uniforms and the things, I know, and Senator Pizzo and I, we talk, when you're talking about Director Guthrie, and when you declare a state of emergency, then those federal dollars can come down, and it's not us on the hook for a disaster or a problem. Aren't we creating a situation where we're going to be on the hook for the response?
Senator Avila.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Book, for that question. So if there is a state of emergency that's declared and the federal government is assisting certainly with that effort and providing resources towards the effort, I'm sure that there will be reimbursements that take place. So it wouldn't be entirely on the state because there would be some resources that would come down from the federal government for the assistance of the operation.
Follow-up, Chair?
Yes.
So let's play it out if we could. There's a situation that occurs, whether it's a collapsed building in South Florida or a major disaster, maybe not to the, well, it could have been like the flooding that we had in Broward County, which was really terrible. The governor would then say, we're going to release our FSG to respond. We would then, the state would be on the hook for all of the response and cleanup rather than him declaring a state of emergency, which we're very glad that he did, and getting some of that reimbursement.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for that. So certainly the governor and the state would have to certainly make that request of the federal government for that assistance, for those reimbursements to take place. We certainly saw that with Hurricane Ian, where the federal government, after I think the first initial week, came in and certainly said that they were going to provide full assistance for the cleanup and for the services that would be needed in order for that full recovery to take place.
Final follow-up, and I think this was asked, but I just want to make sure I understand it. So the governor on his own could deploy the Florida State Guard. He wouldn't need any other branch, any other executive cabinet meeting to do so. He could just say, I'm sending out my Florida State Guard for this.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Book. So yes, so right now, certainly we're getting into the season of wildfires. So they could be maybe activated for a mission of that magnitude, right? We're seeing shortages with DOC. We certainly could see, those individuals, that personnel maybe fill a void in that capacity. So there are instances where the State Guard would certainly be a force multiplier for the National Guard. I would tell you, aside from all of those things that I described, there are a lot of mobilizations and deployments that are currently taking place. And it's not a big, it's really not a big force in terms of the Florida National Guard. Certainly not up to the size of the state in terms of the population. Again, we're ranked 53rd out of 54 states and territories. So there is a big need for more personnel to assist with all of the ongoing missions. And each and every year, it depends on the type of hurricanes that come through, right? If it's a more devastating hurricane, you're going to need more individuals, more personnel to really help out and stabilize the situation, but also to provide those resources to that impacted area.
One more. Thank you. And this was asked and answered by Senator Polsky in a way and Senator Pizzo, and Senator Avila, this is what you do, and so you do it well. And I would have no doubt that you would execute this in a wonderfully, wonderful way. But we could be talking about a crisis at the border that we're paying for, that the executive currently sitting in this position who would have the power to go and send Florida National Guards people that we're creating somewhere else that we're paying for. So I guess my question is, are you concerned at all with the lack of checks and balances when creating a new form of small military in Florida?
Mr. Avila.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for that. So I'll tell you, so this isn't, we already have and we've had a defense force in state statute. It was created in the 40s when the National Guard was deployed for World War II. And we needed a force to basically, protect the state of Florida, right? And to ensure that if, God forbid there were any attacks on Florida soil, that we would have a defense force. So that was in state statute. It's been in state statute. This is sort of bringing it more in line with sort of what our present needs and challenges are. We certainly, I anticipate, certainly some sort of conflict in Asia, in the Pacific, probably within the next 5 years. I anticipate that. You're certainly seeing it with Russia and Ukraine. You're seeing it, sort of completely destabilize that part of Eastern Europe. You're seeing it in the Middle East around our main ally in the region, which is Israel. So you're seeing all these conflicts take place. You're seeing a lot of destabilization take place in Africa, in certain parts of Africa, particularly in Sudan now. So you're seeing all this conflict everywhere, and you're having a lot of mobilizations and deployments that are not just specific to Florida. Across the nation, you're having a lot of National Guard units, a lot of reserve units, a lot of active duty units that are being asked to, be in different parts of the world in order to keep an area as stable as possible. So with that, again, our force is only 12,000. You're going to need a force to augment when those forces are asked to either mobilize or deploy to another part of the world.
I have a flip
One
mean
follow-up.
comment, so I'm not going to make it. I'll just do it in debate.
Okay. Yes, Senator Hill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And in looking at the analysis, there's a clear definition about what defense forces are, and they're for use exclusively within a jurisdiction as considered necessary by the governor or chief executive. Would we not have to have some kind of a mutual aid agreement, as we do on a lot of different things when we have various disasters? Would it not require that we have a mutual aid agreement with another state in order for our forces, our defense forces, to be deployed there? We could not just willy-nilly decide we wanted to go and do something in another state. Am I reading this correctly?
Senator Avila.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Harrell, for that. So certainly operating within a natural disaster scenario, similar to our EMAC personnel that have those agreements with those other states, so that we provide that help and that assistance during certainly their time of need. That would be the case with the State Guard, right? They would essentially operate as EMAC personnel that go to assist and augment those states that need those personnel on the ground, whether it's for search and rescue missions or whether it's to run distribution points, get resources out to that impacted area or assist those residents. That would essentially have to take place. We're not just sending people anywhere. Like, it would have to be obviously a state of emergency within that particular state. And a scenario where we have that agreement with that state to provide EMAC personnel, and in this case, State Guard personnel.
Follow up?
And would we not have to have a specific request for that from the governor? We couldn't decide Alabama's had a hurricane and we just want to go send our forces there. There would be, not only do we have to have an agreement, but also we would have to have a request from that governor with specific parameters as to what they are to do and assist with. Would that not be true?
Senator Avila.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Harrell. Yes, and again, the governor would and is under this bill would be the commander-in-chief of the State Guard. So the governor would have to activate those personnel in order to go assist that state in their time of need.
Okay. Anyone else? Senator Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Avila. Appreciate you carrying this bill. There's a number of states that have state guards established. The number, honestly, is closer to like 23 states that currently have active state guard units. Is that accurate?
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Burgess, for that. Yes, there are currently 23 states, Alaska, California, Connecticut, Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Mississippi, New Mexico, New York, Ohio, Oregon, Puerto Rico, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, Virginia, and Washington that all have a state guard.
Thank you.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In Florida, and the number of times you've been mobilized for natural disasters since you joined the Guard is unbelievable. Hats off to you, because you have a pretty specific mission that isn't just federal. Obviously, it's state. But what we've learned through these natural disasters, especially exacerbated by the pandemic and these storms, is we've been exposed to just how undermanned we are as a Guard here in the state of Florida, which has, I think, elevated or prompted the need to look to and address how we can overcome that shortage at the state level. And that ultimately is the impetus behind why we're looking to reinstate what was once the Florida State Guard. Is that accurate?
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Burgess. Yes, that is 100% accurate. As I've mentioned before, right now we're currently ranked 53rd out of 54 states and territories in terms of our troop levels for the Florida National Guard. Now, the Florida National Guard, and not just the Florida National Guard, but every National Guard in the entire country, their mission essentially changed after 9/11. And it was no longer just a force that would solely respond to natural disasters. More and more, the National Guard is certainly stepping up to play a key role in mobilizations and deployments. And so with that, certainly you have, when you have already a small force to begin with and you're going through all those missions abroad, certainly to make sure that the United States of America and its interests are preserved and protected, as well as our residents are protected, you're going to start to see a thinning out of that force at home. So this force here will be extremely crucial to make sure that we're able to support and augment not just the Florida National Guard, but state and local agencies, certainly during a time of a natural disaster and other disasters.
Mr. Chair, thank you. And I think you may have already stated this. I apologize if you did, but we're not able to just up our numbers, unilaterally without federal approval for our National Guard forces. Is that accurate?
Senator?
That is absolutely, Mr. Chairman, thank you. That is absolutely accurate. So that our current troop level is established at the federal level, and it has not been adjusted, I believe, since the late 1950s, if I'm not mistaken. And so we've essentially maintained the same number of personnel for the Florida National Guard that we had back in the late 1950s, even though our population is now, very close to 23 million residents. So we're the third largest state, but we're 53rd in terms of our force within the National Guard to protect and to serve our residents.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, one more question. And it would be fair to assume that we're also one of the most disaster-prone states in the nation?
Senator?
Mr. Chairman, that is absolutely correct. We face just about everything, right? Not just from the hurricanes, but certainly we've seen it with flooding. We've seen it with wildfires. We've seen it with a pandemic. A lot of our soldiers and airmen in the Florida National Guard have been,
I don't think so.
They were activated for more than a year and a half for the COVID response mission. So you take into account all of those things, and then you take into account, the Capitol security. You take into account other missions statewide. Not to say that we also have mobilizations and deployments that go into that. So it's really a big picture view in terms of the amount of things that the Florida National Guard is consistently doing on a yearly basis.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, and asking for a friend to my right, you can't be both a member of the National Guard and the State Guard at the same time, correct?
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is correct.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
All right. We have no appearance forms. We're now in debate. Anyone wanting to debate? Senator Baxley.
Thank you very much. I rise in support of this good planning in uncertain times and an uncertain world. And I think looking at all the parameters that you've laid out before us, it's perfectly clear we're not at our best preparation, and we can do better. We're strong enough, we're sure enough, and we're large enough that we should be a leader on any front in the country that's before us to meet the challenge. So thank you for your leadership in putting together this good insurance of preparation. That makes the difference. You can't get ready after a surprise has happened and you've had a disaster happen and then tried to recover from. I think it's very wise in these times to move in this direction. I support the bill. Thank you.
Senator Harrell.
Thank you. I too very much support this bill. Having sat on the Military Affairs Committee for many years and have really seen the need for additional National Guard, which we've not been able to get over the many years. We have asked our congressional delegation, we've sent proclamations and resolutions asking for additional members of our National Guard. And we've unfortunately not been able to get that. You delineated our need. There's no doubt about the need. But just to clarify a few points, our National Guard individuals can be deployed. And we saw that during the whole Middle East endeavors, Iraqi freedom, and where National Guardsmen were being deployed all the time, and our numbers were decreased for our needs at home when those deployments happen. The State Guard will not be deployed. They are directly under the governor, and they will not be deployed. So we can then count on having these individuals here to help with the many natural disasters that we experience. I also want to make sure we understand that there is definitely a chain of command. The governor is the ultimate commander, and that in order for our members of the State Guard to go out of the state, there has to be agreements and arrangements for specific things. They cannot be just sent anywhere the governor would want to send them. There have to be mutual aid agreements between states, just as we have in a whole variety of things. Everything from our electrical grid, we have agreements with other states for mutual aid. So it's a similar type situation where there would have to be specific requests. And presumably, in a local disaster situation, again, there's that chain of command. You have to have the specific request in order to go into an area. I think there are safeguards built within this, that this will not be abused, and it is definitely a need we have in the state of Florida. So with that, I would encourage all members to support this very good bill.
Any other debate?
Mr. Chair.
Senator Pizzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple of years ago, members that were here will recall that Senator Burgess had SB 94 and SB 96. And the first iteration of SB 94 asked for $1 billion for the governor to be able to use for those moments of disaster. And then further looking into that bill, disaster would be defined as anything that he got together with I think 2 other people, it might have been FDOT and one other agency, to determine what that disaster is. And I had asked Senator Burgess, could one of those disasters be immigration? And he said he didn't know, or, you know, tough to say. And then we moved on from those. Senator Sargel had made me move on from those questions. I had agreed to vote for that bill if we have the number from $1 billion to $500 million, because the governor would have had access, actually took $11 billion. And aspirationally, I think everyone hopes that everyone gets along and all that stuff. I think it is a trust issue. And I have less faith by the position taken that, don't worry, it's all going to be in one particular person's hands. That gives me less faith. This is something that I think should be done by committee. So I ended up voting for SB 94 and 96 because of the amount and because of some bit of guardrails. This has very few. Asking for help often takes place with a whisper on a cell phone call, and then all of a sudden some of our law enforcement end up in a different state, 56 of them, with no consideration for remuneration for those services that we provided to that state. So with this particular situation, it gives me less comfort knowing that one person is in charge, where under SB 94 and 96, at least it took a committee. Sure enough, there was an executive order or state of emergency as it relates to immigration. I mean, literally in slow motion, the exact hypothetical that I asked during Senator Burgess's bill happened. So here's my position. I'm actually going to vote for it because I don't think the next guy is going to abuse it. I don't think the next person is going to abuse it with toy soldiers. And that's absolutely the situation that we're in. It's now getting weird. Maybe it's beyond weird that we're in this situation. I get it that I also serve on military and veterans affairs. I know there's a large dearth of National Guardsmen, but the hierarchy is not clear. Who's in charge is not clear. I was looking for those comfort feelings when you're watching a TV show traditionally and the local detective has it until the FBI shows up, you know? Then they take over the scene. I don't have any of that. And you can't explain that. And I would be more comfortable if we had a very bright line, clear chain of command. And I'm telling you, having stood in Surfside, and even with Senator Albritton in my office for almost 7 hours, there is no clear chain of command in this state, because everything seems to be beholden, both in this building and outside, to the whims and wishes of the governor. That's not healthy, not in a democracy.
Senator Book.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo some of Senator Pizzo's comments. Look, Senator Avila, you and I have talked a lot about your service and how much I love and respect you and how thankful I am that you're doing what you're doing. And I support what this is. I do. I think this is important. I understand it. And even Senator Martin talking about, a natural disaster, tornadoes, and, a National Guard not responding because they don't like the whims and wishes of a certain governor or what they're doing. But to echo some of Senator Pizzo's points, there is no guardrail in place. If there were guardrails here, another different chain of command, somebody else that has to, deploy what this is dangerous. I mean, what, we're going to put a prison next to Disney and we're going to occupy Epcot? Like, that's the sort of thing that's coming out of this branch right now. And giving that kind of power to somebody so power hungry that exists currently, I believe is dangerous. Do I think this is an important piece of policy? Do I think it's smart? I do. But not without any guardrails, not without any ability for us to protect those guardsmen even. Yes, we should deploy if there's a situation somewhere far away. But again, what are we doing? This is a lot of power being handed over at a time where we're just kind of handing the keys to the kingdom over. I support it in policy, but not right now, not where we are, and I think it's kind of dangerous.
Any other debate? Okay, Senator Avila, please close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senators. So I'll tell you, this bill certainly provides the structure for the State Guard. This is not a new concept. This is something that we've had in our books or on our books since 1941. Right? This is not something completely out of the blue, out of left field that is just happening. Apart from that, to Senator Burgess's point, we're not the only state that has a State Guard, right, or a Defense Force. There's 23, right, that have this same setup and this same structure, and their commander-in-chief is their governor. So we're not completely doing something out of the ordinary. This is something that is already in state statute, which other states, they have been doing for quite some time. And just to give you some examples of some of the things that in the other states they do, some of these State Guards, they perform administrative support services, armory staffing, ceremonial activities, ceremonial band, ceremonial guard units, chaplain support services, combating wildfires, communication support services, cybersecurity support services, disaster relief support services, engineering support services, financial support services, humanitarian support services, information technology support services, legal support services, liaison support services, logistical support services, medical support services, public affairs support services, and search and rescue operations. That is currently taking place in 22 other states. The state of Florida is setting up the State Guard, or I should say, reviving the State Guard because of the need and the shortage that we currently have with the Florida National Guard. That is the absolute bottom line here, right? We're ranked 53rd out of 54 states and territories. We have 12,000 soldiers and airmen that are meant to serve a state that is the third largest in the union.
Robin?
We are often impacted, whether it's by hurricanes, wildfires, floodings, pandemics, you name it, we are often impacted by it. And I'll say in terms of, Senator Pizza's point, there is a structure in place. The governor would serve as the commander-in-chief. Right now, we're establishing the director for this entity to serve as sort of that chain of command. That director will set up the chain of command. It won't be me. We'll set up that chain of command, and this entity will certainly help out a great deal in making sure that we are adequately staffing, adequately serving our residents in the state of Florida. I can assure you that during COVID-19, we all saw it, right? There were a lot of sites that were manned by the Florida National Guard. A lot of sites, especially in our county, right? We set up the very first one, right? Right by the Hard Rock. If we had this organization in place, they would be there to support and to augment those operations that took place for more than a year and a half. So this State Guard, I can assure you, senators, is going to be an asset because it will be able to provide that support and then augment, those shortages that we're currently seeing in the Florida National Guard, not because of our doing, not because of the state of Florida, but because that is the cap that has been in place for the state of Florida since the 1950s. And in order for the state of Florida to gain in troop levels for the Florida National Guard, another state needs to lose out because it's a zero-sum game. And every state fights tooth and nail in order for them to keep their bases, in order for them to keep their troop levels, because at the end of the day, that also equals a good chunk of change in terms of dollar figures. So in lieu of, for the past 70 years, us not seeing an increase from our federal partners with the Florida National Guard, our next best option is to make sure that we have a force here that is solely specific to the state of Florida and that is there to assist our residents and to keep them safe and to make sure that they are receiving the best possible service in a time of need as possible. And with that, I urge your favorable support.
Robin, please call the roll on CS for CS HB 1285.
Senator Avila? Yes. Senator Baxley? Yes. Senator Book? No. Senator Bradley? Yes. Senator Broder? Yes. Senator Burgess? Yes. Senator Davis? No. Senator Grahl? Yes. Senator Gruters? Senator Harrell? Yes. Senator Hooper? Yes. Senator Ingolia? Yes. Senator Martin? Yes. Senator Perry? Yes. Senator Pizzo? Senator Polsky? No. Senator Powell?
No.
Senator Roussan? No. Chair Broxton?
Yes, and by your vote, CS for CS HB 1285 is reported favorably. Members, let's go to tab 15.